In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi, I'm Max.
Hi, I'm Bill.
And I'm Rebecca. And this is What the Adaptation. Welcome to another episode of The Sandman. This is the YouTube show where we discuss adaptations from one form to another. And you can see we've got a little bit of a different team with us tonight. Our usuals, Glenn and Jen, are on another assignment. They were recording with The Way of the Leaf tonight with their Wheel of Time rewatch. So I am excited to talk about this episode. We have Bill with us. Bill, remind everybody who you are, even though you've been on with us, a bunch of times before.
I'm Bill, aka Matt Stagger. Usually hanging around Wheel of Time chats. You'll find me in some other places, some Sandman stuff here and there, because I am a big fan, particularly of this episode and this run of the comics. So I'm really excited for tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoyed this episode. So, Max, what can you tell us about it?
Well, this is obviously episode 6, The Sound of Our Wings. It is based on the 8th issue by the same name, as well as the 13th issue, Men of Good Fortune. Mm-hmm. It is written by Lauren Bellow, known for Foundation, and directed by Merzy Almas, known for Outlander, Shadow and Bone, and Paper Girls.
Yeah. All right. So I think we should just dive right in. This is definitely going to be a fun episode to talk about. So, as you know, it's interesting, starting with the question, as we often do, like what sort of changes, do we like or dislike from the source material? And this is, I would say, much closer to source material than anything we've seen so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the dialogue is straight out of the comic. I mean, word for word, large chunks.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, they put 2 issues together, which was, an interesting
Makes sense.
Choice. It did kind of flow. And not only that, but then they put in like this little button at the end of the episode that was like from the beginning of another issue, like just giving us that little glimpse of desire at the end there.
Just a little taste.
Yeah, just a little taste. So that was another interesting choice. But I thought that kind of flowed too, because this is like we're meeting one of Dream's siblings for the first time, and then at the end, hey, there's another one. So a little hint about that. So anybody want to talk about some things that they, anything you noticed that was different?
I know there was some issues with casting. People weren't happy because Death didn't look exactly like she did in the comics, and I couldn't disagree more. As far as I'm concerned, this was perfect casting. So I did run into some issues on some message boards and Twitter and things like that. The usual sort of stuff. But I think she embodied the empathy and everything that Death is supposed to have from the comics perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't think they could have cast it better.
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing, I think it's important that's like sort of referenced in the comics, maybe not this issue in particular, but that the Endless don't necessarily appear the same to everyone all the
Correct.
time, so that part is not particularly important, but they paid so much detail to even like looking at this, the panel behind you, Bill, like the illustration there, like the way that they did her costuming, the down to the necklace and everything. There was great attention to detail there. So,
it is interesting.
Black the Ankh.
Yeah.
It was just perfect.
Yeah.
It is interesting, like the audiobook, they changed it up the most in that she was more of a young girl. Like boy we meet with the soccer was a lot younger.
Yeah.
Right.
But other than that, I don't know if they really changed much from the comics from the audio.
Yeah.
I
just
believe
the
it was
ages.
Kat Dennings doing the voice for that. Yeah,
I thought she sounded familiar. I didn't realize it was Kat Dennings, but yes, she has that very young sounding voice. And I agree that was a bit different, and it's kind of cute in a way in the audiobook how she's like calling him little brother and she sounds like a teenage girl. But
I was thinking she's like 8 in the book audio.
Or maybe, I don't know. Yeah, she does sound young. But it's Yeah, no. As you said, I mean, you could say that's a change, but it's just so minor and insignificant that it's yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say is they've added to her characterization, right? They give her some additional lines that I think just sort of flesh out her character even more in the show. So that was something I appreciated.
What they did was pull from a different run.
Yeah.
That they did. Death had a sort of prequel where she went through a rough patch. Mm-hmm. So some of that dialogue is directly from that. So
I had read about that. I hadn't read that story.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's good that you read that, because I was curious about that. I had read that was where it came from. So it's not like it came out of nowhere, but it was nice that it was added in. Yeah. I mean, I don't actually feel like there's that much to say on this particular question, unlike usual. Like I feel like there's very little that was changed. It was extremely faithful, and it was just a matter of sort of weaving these different stories together into one. More than
this one does have something like, say, the first chapter was missing, where we had all those hundreds of different stories, people sleeping.
Yeah.
Where this is that collection of short stories, and it largely doesn't matter if they use the exact same story of this person drowning or the baby.
True.
They could have mixed up completely different stories, made up their own, and it still would have worked.
That's true. And there was one that was different. I had forgotten about that. There's like the one where it's a stand-up comic who dies.
Yeah, electrocutes herself. Yeah,
electrocutes herself with the microphone, and instead you have like the newlywed man drowning. But I mean, to me, that was certainly a more poignant story. If you want to go for something that has like an emotional tug, to have a man drown on his honeymoon is probably just, pulls on that a little bit more than, I guess it could be seen as almost
comedic relief.
Humorous. Yeah, almost humorous, right? That someone might like it's in a grotesque way, but
I think it was softening us up for the blow to come with the baby, and I applaud them for doing that, because it's rough. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to break your heart.
Yeah,
and it does. But at the same time, you sort of get that emotion from death, the empathy, the sort of sadness that she's having to do this, but it's her job.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's a good point, because there's less of a tonal shift than to go from the drowning to the death of the baby, as opposed to something somewhat comedic in the middle and then going to that. So it was a better tone, I suppose. Yeah. And you're right about that part being the most emotional. And I mean, I hate it because it's like it's a gut punch, but yeah, it's effective.
Well, it's a line from that I'll never forget. You got what we all got, a lifetime, and that has stuck with me since I was a kid. And the big thing about the comics for me, I loved them, reading them growing up. But when I was diagnosed with cancer and terrified of the prospect of death, knowing it's a large probability, I found myself going back to Sandman, and this death sort of shifted my perspective. And so in my head, this is my death. When my time comes, this is the person I want to show up for me. So for me, it's a very emotional in the comic and on the episode.
Yeah.
So it really hits me sort of on a different note. And I love that. But it really touches on the idea that death isn't something necessarily to be afraid of. It's an eventuality for all of us, and that death can be empathetic and understanding, as opposed to this hooded, cloaked reaper, who's coming to steal your life.
Yeah, it is very refreshing. I mean, that is there throughout, so that's not a change, that portrayal of death, but it is sort of refreshing to see death portrayed in this way, so different from the way it's often done.
I would have to interject and mention one of my favorite shows was the TV series called Dead Like Me, which is literally
Georgie.
Yeah. And it has a very similar tone in some ways.
Yeah. Maybe this was, did this come first? I assume the
comic.
So I mean, yeah, I don't know the show.
I don't know what it's based on, but I would be surprised if there was some inspiration there.
Inspiration. Yeah. Yeah, that could be. Interesting. Anything else anybody wanted to touch on for like changes from the source material? I don't have much to say on it really, but
Well, we've only really talked about the wing side.
yeah.
Right, not the hobgoblin side.
Yeah, right. We can talk about that for sure. Yeah.
I can't remember offhand, but I'm pretty sure they changed a few things from his story.
They did. Yeah, the one that comes to mind in particular is they added in, it's 1989, and in the comic, in the audiobook, he does meet him in 1989. So this was like the first time after they have their fight. And in the show, he misses it because they cut to him and he's in the, he's still trapped. And then it's like basically showing him coming back later. I think after meeting with Death in the first part of the episode, he goes to look for his friend and does find him. So in an off year, it's not at 100-year mark. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, I can see why they did that. It actually shows his growth for the first time. We see real growth from Morpheus, because at this point, you kind of like him, but you're kind of like, okay, maybe not.
100%. I mean, he's just he's kind of flat as a character. He doesn't evolve so much. So, yeah.
Well, I'd say like, was it last episode he had basically faced death, you could say?
Yeah, came very close with John D. So
yeah.
And that changes a person.
What cracks me up is they set the whole thing up with Death. You go through that, and then you think back and you realize, okay, so in the first episode, when his captor died, she had to be there. You had to see her brother in there and go, well,
yeah.
Sorry, dude.
I mean, I guess you could argue, because she does say there are exceptions. She's not there for everyone.
True.
So perhaps not. But yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting. Yeah.
I just assumed she couldn't cross the magic circle to help him.
Maybe. Yeah.
I like that better. I was just thinking, there was some sort of rule where she's like, I can't interfere.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also picture her as like this entity that splits herself up into millions of little parts. Billions, trillions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, she'd have
sort
to
of envision that. Yeah, definitely. But I do like that change, because I think it's tying it back. It's acknowledging that happened. And I think it maybe adds a little bit more weight to their reunion, because you get to see him react when Dream doesn't show up. And then when they do reunite, it's like even more of a, I think meaningful moment. So I do like the addition.
I feel like at least the audio, we didn't really get much of their meeting when they actually did meet. It's like more like fade to black. Oh, hi, and then fade to black.
Yeah, we didn't get details at all.
We didn't get much details here, but I kind of felt like this time Sandman was going to tell him a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it did sort of have that vibe.
It's not really the other way around.
Right.
Hobb would be telling the story.
What he's been doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. He would certainly have more of a story to tell. And again, acknowledging that, like, okay, yes, I'm your friend, so now I'm going to give something back. That would make sense. Yeah. I don't think I noticed too much else in the way of changes in that part of it that I can think of.
No.
Maybe a couple little things with Shakespeare, maybe.
I mean, they removed some stuff. I mean, they streamlined and removed some dialogue and things, but yeah.
I think we're going to get a lot more of that in season 2.
Season 2.
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to go back to that. So,
okay.
What's that story called? Was it Midsummer?
Yeah. So yeah, they've set some things up, and certainly they were setting something up at the end again by like bringing Desire into the very end of the episode. They're like setting that up. So again, I sort of like that choice, because it's kind of like, I really like this episode, but it's kind of like we were talking about how, Dream as a protagonist is sort of flat. Like you sort of need something to like keep you like invested. And, the first arc of the season was sort of over. And then this episode is sort of like an in-between episode. And it does have a feeling to it where you might go, oh, okay, well, it's sort of like resolving things. So then I think they kind of needed that to like carry into the next arc, if that makes sense.
Yeah, especially after last episode, I think this one they needed a heavy tonal shift,
Yeah.
and you sort of needed an episode sort of hit the reset button and go, okay,
Yeah.
so things were dark.
Mhm.
Let's look a little bit on the brighter side, with see some growth and some things from there.
Yeah.
Because that last episode was just brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the audio version is so much worse for me.
Yeah.
It's bad. Yeah.
Oh,
It's really bad.
yeah.
I agree. Yeah. But like I said, I think if you didn't have that little thing at the end with Desire, you might come to the end of this episode and be like, oh, okay. Like that kind of wraps things up. I mean, obviously there's more episodes, but like, you still want people to like keep watching. So I don't know.
Yeah, it could have felt like filler without that little tease at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even without that, I would have loved the episode, but that's for
Yeah.
my own personal reasons. So
No, I agree. I think it is a great episode without that. It's more just like how it connects to the
it's the hook.
season as a whole. Yeah.
I would honestly say that if they made 6 episodes and ended there, that'd be a perfectly fine season finale.
It would have. That's what I'm saying. And,
yes,
and that's
absolutely.
that's exactly what I'm saying. Like if you didn't have that little hook, it would kind of
Mhm.
feel like that, I think.
It's like, I know when I was reading the audiobooks, like I got to that part and then I just kind of like dropped off for a few months and then picked it up again.
Yeah.
It's like it was just that good of a ending that like
Exactly.
I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
I remember being a teenager and reading the comic book, and it was issue number 8, I believe, The Sound of Her Wings.
Mhm.
And I put that down and I went, okay, this has changed comic books.
Mhm.
For me, this has completely changed, because before that, it was all superheroes and things like that. And this was the first comic I think I read where they really delved into death and sort of issues like that. And I'm like, this is a game changer.
Yeah.
So I was very nervous about this episode and what
Yeah.
changes they would make. And I'm happy to see they really did make a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they didn't need to, is what it came down to. It's sort of an
Yeah.
unusual episode of television, but it does work, I think.
And I was thinking earlier that this version of Death would definitely not like Thanos if they were, Marvel, not DC.
No.
Definitely not.
Deadpool might, but that's a different matter entirely.
Mhm.
I could still see that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could totally see him date.
Okay, so we're ready to kind of move on and tackle the next question. So this next one, kind of a catch-all, but anything we wanted to bring in terms of how they adapted visuals, and as well as like costuming, music, like, how are we creating the world in this episode?
I would say I didn't like Dream's costumes for the most part.
Yeah.
And-
The yeah, and the
Yeah.
hair. He wasn't really passing very well in some cases. Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with it, but my wife was driven nuts by the fact that the black shirt didn't match her black pants. They were off tonally. She's like,
Oh.
I'm not sure that anybody would wear that. I'm like, it's Death. She's allowed.
I wasn't bothered by her outfit at
Yeah,
all.
me
I think
either.
It was great. Yeah. No, it was just his looks when he's in the past. Some of them were a little off, but
For whatever reason, I was thinking that he kind of reminded me of Dream. Reminded me of Jared Way from My Chemical Romance.
Oh.
From one of his outfits.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
the haircut and
The hair.
yeah.
Yeah. I can see that.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. I see it
Yeah.
when he had the down do.
Yeah.
With the,
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
just did not work with him, but
Yeah, but I think as I already mentioned, I did like their detail with Death's costume, because they're like really like nodding, right to the comic there. That was nice. The other thing that I think they really like nailed in terms of comic description was, again, the very end with Desire and that little glimpse that we have. I mean, that was just like spot on.
And I love Mason Alexander Park. I mean, they're great.
Yeah.
I
mean,
love them in this role.
I'm sort of amazed, like they are perfect. Like I just like
Yeah.
like where did this person come from? Because it's like straight out of the comic, pretty much.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Timur. So I think they are in Quantum Leap.
Yeah, they are.
Which was a kind of a surprise. I was watching it the other day, like, shit, that's Desire.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a
Haven't
huge
seen it.
Quantum Leap fan too, so I've been watching the new version. Love seeing them there.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think I have much else on visuals. Like I said, overall pretty good. Some weird, costuming makeup for Dream, but otherwise I think very good.
Morpheus and Black Parade.
Yeah. But it was a challenging episode in terms of, I think, all that kind of stuff, like all the various costumings and the different, eras. That was a tough one.
Yeah.
From a set design standpoint, I feel like this was shot over many months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if they actually use the same building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot. Yes. Good point. Yeah. Yeah, it's that part is tough. So, that was pretty good overall. Okay. Oh, right. Okay, so then let's talk about our, scene or sequence that was the most memorable for whatever reason, something you love the most, hated if you hate. I don't think we hated anything, so I think that's off the table. But anything that was just most memorable or loved the most.
Yeah, just say the whole episode.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
fair. Fair. Pretty much.
For me, I think it was the use of shadow for her wings. You never see them; you just see the shadow of them, and you hear them. And I found that uniquely beautiful.
Yeah, that was cool.
So for me, that was just spot on, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be honest, if you want to just say like what's most memorable and what impacts you the most, I mean, I love the whole episode, but yeah, the scene where the baby dies. I mean, you don't forget that, right? Like that hits you. It impacts you the most. To me, so that's the sort of standout. But
I find it funny that I was so relieved because I was terrified of the mother's reaction, and they cut away from it without showing it. I'm like, thank you. Oh God, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I guess it was interesting because, it's like, what is she there for? She's not there for the mom. And so,
Right.
We don't get to see it. I mean, it's sort of a gift to us because it would be so much more painful to have to confront that. Right. So if we're just talking about confronting the death in isolation, it's less horrible than if we're talking about confronting grief, which we don't do in that case. Yeah.
By them not showing like the death knell there, you're going to be imagining that yourself now.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think it's worse in my head than it probably would have been on screen. So
yeah, it's worse. I mean, well, I don't know. It's definitely bad in my head. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, mine too.
So, it's yeah. Any other scenes or sequences you want to?
I could mention the little tiny detail in the inn scene where he mentions like, we got chimneys now, but if they could do something with these fleas, and you just see him kind of start scratching.
Yeah. Yes, that was cute. Definitely.
I didn't catch it the first time, but I was like, oh yeah, he's definitely scratching at those fleas right in front of Morpheus.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was nice detail.
I love the little interaction with Joanna Constantine. I enjoyed that. So just that little pop back.
Yeah, and actually that has like a little bit of a different spin too, because like, because they used Joanna Constantine, like it just, because they changed Constantine in the other episode, it's a little different than it was in the comics. So I don't know. That was kind of cool.
I just want to know when Doctor Who comes into this.
Yeah,
he could.
Seems like it would fit.
Can't think of any reason why. Not a single one.
Okay. All right. So I mean, next we talk about our favorite actors castings for this episode. I feel like we might all have the same one, but I don't know. Let's see.
The fleas.
Oh yeah, you do tend to like your animal actors.
It's got to be Kirby Howell-Baptiste. I mean,
100%.
Just chef's kiss. Perfect.
She was amazing. Yeah. So Yeah, I couldn't say it enough. Like, I think she's just absolutely perfect for the role. The compassion, the empathy that she displays, and it's nothing else to say. She's perfect. I having seen her in a different type of role too, like, this is sort of like this role isn't flashy, like it's not like a flashy part that you necessarily realize how wonderful the work is that she's doing. But if you've seen her in other things, then it hits it even harder, because you realize, like, even though it's sort of like an understated role, she's just nailing every detail so perfectly, and it's not necessarily what you always would see from her. So what she's bringing something specifically to this.
Right. I couldn't ask for a better acting job for this character at all.
Yeah.
And now I can't imagine anybody else in the part. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's my idea of casting perfection right there. When that locks into your head, that's that person.
True.
You can't picture somebody else. Casting agent has done well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'd have to. Yep.
Oh, I was just going to say Ferdinand Kingsley, who played Hob Gatlin, was going to be my number 2.
Yeah.
Because
also good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention Ferdinand as well. Honestly, I'd say Samuel Belkin and Angus Yellow-Lees as Shakespeare and Kit Marlowe were decent.
That was fun. Yeah,
from what I saw.
Yeah.
That was a nice throw in.
And then Sarah Toomey, Blushing Lou.
Oh gosh, yeah.
She had like the dirtiest speech I've ever heard on TV, but every word was, by itself okay, but holy shit.
Yeah, subtitles. I had those on. I'm like, wait, did she really just say that? I had to rewind a couple times. Like, yep, she said cream stick. Okay.
I mean, that's straight out of the comics, so
I know.
There you go.
I just wasn't sure if they would include it.
It's true. Yeah, no, she was fun though.
Like I said, dirtiest word combination.
Yeah.
And she said it with a straight face.
She did. It was good. Yeah.
Yeah, with that accent, it was just.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's the other thing too.
I mean, you'd
she
have to have that accent for that.
Yeah,
there's
essential.
no other way.
Yeah, it's definitely essential.
It
yeah,
just doesn't work with like an Australian or Texan.
Any other thing. Yeah,
Texan would just feel wrong.
Well, hi there. You won't rob my cream stick.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, that tasted bad. Just coming out of. Can't imagine how bad that sounded.
I'm just gonna put that on a voice loop here and a little button.
There you go.
Just bring that out whenever you need it.
Mason Alexander.
Oh yeah. We did mention them, but we didn't bring them in when the casting discussion. But also, yes, absolutely perfect casting. Absolutely perfect casting. Yes. So yeah, Dream's siblings, and just I guess we can say, they're nailing the endless casting. It is quite on point.
I'm excited for season 2 because I know we get more. So yes.
Time to talk about themes in this episode, which I feel like there's a fair amount to talk about there. Does anybody want to kick us off?
I think for me, overall, the entire episode is more about being grounded or having somebody to ground you.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's death grounding him, which leads him to re-examine his whole relationship with Hob. So for me, I think that's one of the major themes is having somebody in your life that's not afraid to go, hey, stop being an idiot.
Yes.
And pointing out when you're sitting around being mopey and feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
The one that comes to me is change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was the whole point of Hobbs' story, his change.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how miserable things got, he wanted to stick around and see the change.
Yeah, that was interesting. Like it sort of makes you think about like what people might be like if they lived so much longer, right? Because he changes too. He evolves absolutely, and because he has these several lifetimes, so there's the potential there that maybe isn't always realized. So it was interesting. Yeah. I mean,
Well, I think they
yeah,
showed that well in Hobgathling's whole getting into the slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Dream pointing out, the gift I've given you, you would take away from another man.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was great, just as an example of like, hey, someone made a point that like actually like sunk in, which is, that's hard, to make that point. But the theme wise, it did. Mm-hmm. He said it in a way that like made sense to Hob, right? Like it
right.
Yeah.
Well,
so he was grounding him there at that point.
Yeah. Even when Hobbs said it, even coming from his mouth, it didn't really feel like he was really enthused about what he was doing.
Yeah.
But justifying why he was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like he didn't really want to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Until, Morpheus.
But he had someone who made him and was able to say it in a way that actually got him to listen, which is that's rare, right? To like confront someone on something that they don't really want to think about, and then they do think about it, and then they actually like change and regret. I mean, maybe they didn't get into it quite as much in this episode, as I think there's like maybe a line that didn't make it in, where like he's talking about how he, you were right about this slave trade, like I can't make up for that, basically. Like, so
right.
he carried guilt about that. Yeah. Okay. So I had some other themes that I thought are, I mean, a theme throughout, a big one, I think, is purpose. Like what gives life purpose, what gives meaning to existence, because Dream is questioning that in the first place. Like, he felt like he had more of a purpose when he had a quest, and then when he doesn't have the quest, he feels like that's gone. And through his conversation with Death, she's really inspiring him as to, that their function is a purpose, that, that she finds meaning and purpose in her function. And then you have Hob, who is, he wants to keep living because for him, there's always purpose. He keeps finding new purpose, and no matter what. And then I think, bringing it back around to Dream again, I think for him, like, we're finally seeing that maybe he has some purpose through friendship, that he's recognizing that is a meaningful aspect to existence, that he was, I don't want to embrace that, but then he does. So,
well, yeah, it's really refreshing to see that he has a bit of heart.
Yes,
because Uptown Now, he's been very clinical about everything.
Yes, yeah. Thank goodness, because like I said, I mean, it's one of my struggles with this show. Like, there are things I really like about it, but I do struggle with Dream as a protagonist, because he just he's too static.
Yeah, I think
I feel like that's intentional.
Yeah.
It is. It is. I totally agree. It makes it hard to for me to engage with the story in the same way.
And I think seeing his further growth is what's driving the whole thing, because he was such a sort of robot, almost, like when it came to his emotions and stuff. It was did not compute with him at all.
Yeah.
So.
The other thing I noticed is that I think, and this wasn't maybe fully explored, but I do think that Dream has maybe been going through some stages of grief, and that in this episode he was in a depression, at least at the beginning, a depression stage of grief, because he did have a major loss, right? His captivity was a major loss, and then he lost even more because of that. So, that did bring out, more in his character. But I did feel like that was kind of, where he was at the beginning, that it was perhaps a stage of grief. And I don't think it was fully explored as a theme, but that's kind of how it struck me. and that maybe, again, not a fully explored aspect, but the first part of the episode was also about like loss, and again, we don't get to see the grief play out, but we do see loss.
So like kind of tack onto that,
Mm-hmm.
because of 24/7, that's post vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you don't really see much in TV is what happens after you fulfill vengeance, and
True.
effectively you get this hollowness,
Mm-hmm.
this emptiness that he's experiencing right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, when you're driven towards one point, once you get to that point, what's left for you? And we don't get to answer that question very often, which I love the line that Death delivers to him. She reminds him, they don't need us. We need them.
Yes. Yeah.
Our whole purpose. We need them.
Because that was pretty important, because it's just sort of even trying to elucidate, like, what are they? Like, why do they exist? And because that's not really something that's like really directly focused on so far, but just, she's bringing that out, like, okay, we're these embodiments of ideas and such, like, but they only exist because of people or living things, I guess.
Yeah, what does she call them? An anthropomorphic personification.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So that is interesting. And again, like, it makes sense that an anthropomorphic personification is static, perhaps, at least to some extent.
Partially, yeah.
Partially. I mean, but again, if our conception of things, if the human conception of something can evolve, then he could evolve. But it would probably do so very slowly, not on the scale that a human would.
Right. Because for him, 100 years is literally just a wink.
Yeah.
So,
and that's definitely in this episode too, right? Like that there, if you live countless, an eternity, then 100 years is like, oh yeah, see you next week, same time next week. So that concept of change, going back to what you said, Max, that like, we're seeing it over a different scale. So in this episode, we get to see hundreds of years pass. So we finally get to see some change.
I'm kind of reminded, Bill might know what I'm talking about. In the comics audiobook, wasn't there something where he met that Martian guy from the DC?
Later on, it
was later?
Yeah.
See, I wasn't sure if it related much to these or not. Like how he changed. Because I'm kind of remembering, like, kind of goes back to how he appears to different people.
Yeah. That actually happened when he was searching out the ruby. That happened.
Okay.
He went to the Justice Society and talked to Scott Free and the Martian Manhunter. And the Manhunter saw him as a Martian fire god.
Yeah.
It's basically just a flaming Martian skull.
Not entirely sure why it reminded me, but like something about that sequence kind of reminded me of some stuff going on here of, how they appear to people and just their static nature, but not being static. In the comics and stuff, obviously, like there's a whole multiverse they're dealing with, and it's not just humans either that they're interacting with. I think there are some allusions to it in this show, but not as much.
Death does mention, when the universe ends, I'll be the last one to put the chair on the table and turn the light out on the way out.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got to realize that encompasses everything in our universe. So,
and she also said she was there at the beginning of like the first, microorganisms,
living thing. Yeah. Right. So she's not just for humans. That's right. So I think that is there. Just an allusion to it, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that Martian scene. I get they can't for copyright reasons and things like that. I get it, but I always love that part.
That's something Max has kind of pointed out a number of times. Like, anything that might connect to like a wider DC universe is usually tamped down pretty much.
I feel like it's a very missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It
Like,
is.
just from a marketing standpoint alone, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. It sort of reminded me of like the Deadpool movies where it was like, okay, we can bring in some X-Men, but we got to keep it like real limited, like, and this sort of like commenting on that, like,
I'm very much looking forward to Deadpool 3 in a few months.
Oh, me too.
Or a year,
Few
basically.
years.
Yeah. I'm expecting it to be he's kidnapping Hugh Jackman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
So anything else on theme or anything else that we wanted to mention about episode 6?
Just the amazing acting. Like I said, everybody was brilliant.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Great acting,
it's
great writing.
rare I get an entire episode where I can't point out one thing that annoyed me, but I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't actually have any complaints about this episode. And that's somewhat unusual because, like I said, there's things I'm enjoying about this show, but there's other things that I'm struggling with. So, but this episode I think is pretty perfect. Yeah.
So is it Matt Hatchett likes the feet?
The boots.
The boots.
It's all about the boots.
Is it the goblin likes the feet?
I don't know. I don't watch enough of the Goblin, so I don't know.
Because
Goblin likes feet.
She takes off her boots and you see her feet, so it's like,
yeah,
you gotta be careful with that in Hollywood.
It's true. They're not showing it though, but I thought it was a nice detail of like, again, just like bringing out her character a little bit more, eating the apple, taking her shoes off, stuff like that.
Oh, I can guarantee you she's on Wiki Feet now.
Oh my God. The stuff that people have to deal with. All right. Well, it was a lot of fun talking about this episode with you guys. I really enjoyed it. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And next week we will be back with episode 7. What do we got for a title and info? The Dollhouse. Yes, yeah. So yeah, this is where I feel like the show kind of like starts a brand new arc with that next episode. So that'll be fun.
Oddly enough, it takes place right down the road from my house in Cocoa Beach. So.
Ooh, nice.
I always love that little detail. Doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but for me, it's like.
But for you, it's cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So I hope everyone will come back and join us. And I think you'll see the 3 of us back next week. Same crew.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us. And Glenn's not here. I'll say it for him. Don't forget to be awesome.